A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. Today we are beginning Dark Age, the 5th book in the Red Rising saga. We are going to be reading through chapter 5. So from the beginning prologue sovereign speech through chapter 5. Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
Dude, I am just in such a good mood. This whole week has been fucking awesome, but today we're finally starting the 5th book in the series, and I'm fucking loving it already. I'm so excited. I'm really excited. So we're gonna geek out over it a little bit.
Dude, I've been I've been anticipating getting here since we started this. So all of this labor that we've been going through to go through the series methodically and talk about all these things has really been to land at this culminating moment so far as we're all aware, right? There will be a 6th book. It's not out yet. It's not even announced. But this has always been kind of the aim, was to get you through this entire series, to get to this book, to talk through and put you where I am right now. And it's so cool to be here. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Very, very excited. So today, as you guys all know, is our first episode covering Dark Age by Pierce Brown. And we are going to tackle the prologue through chapter 5. But before we do that, let's talk about what we're drinking. PJ, what are you having today?
Well, if any of you guys listen to the podcast that we did with Hill Reaper, we did that 2 days ago. And for that, I bought a bottle of absinthe. So today I made a cocktail with absinthe. And it turns out, most cocktails with absinthe, it's like a 1/4 teaspoon that you use as a rinse on the glass. So, I found one that made sense thematically. It's a Corpse Survivor number 2, but for this show, I am rebranding it as The Necromancer. It is 1 part Cointreau, 1 part sweet vermouth, 1 part lemon juice, an absinthe rinse, and a lemon twist to garnish. So nice. I added a little splash of absinthe into the shaker with the other 3 liquids, but I did the rinse as well for the aromatics, and it is really fucking good. I think I like absinthe, man. I think I do.
Interesting.
But if it's done right, not out of a fucking measuring cup with too little sugar. You, for my beer follow-up, you sent me another package because they don't deliver to you. So you just put my address in instead, and I'm drinking your beer. So I've got a cilantro lime ale from Westfax Brewing Company, which is out of Lakewood, Colorado. It's really refreshing. The cilantro and the lime are both really subtle. I venture as to say I really don't pick up anything as far as the cilantro goes, but it as just a straight up porch drinker, like light, yet flavorful. It almost tastes like a lager. It's kind of emulating a lager. Mexican style lager. It's really, really solid. I'm enjoying it. So
nice. Sounds tasty.
What have you got?
I am drinking a modified version of the cocktail that I actually had on the episode with Hill Reaper. I wanted to toy around with it a little bit more with some of the ingredients that I had, kind of per our discussion. And so we go from Blue Shoes, which is what I'm ending up naming the other cocktail, to Blood Red. And so this is that modification on that. So it's very similar. It's 2 ounces of gin, 3/4 ounce smoked honey, elderflower tonic to top, typically about 4 ounces, and cherry syrup to give it kind of that red taste. Not like a fake artificial syrup, but actual, it's not even concentrated. It's like cherry juice, very thick. Yeah, very syrupy. It is delicious. I think it's the like hint of elderflower on the back that I'm really liking, or the hint of the smoked honey. I can't tell which of those three really interesting, weird, flavorful things it is, but oh my gosh, it tastes like cashmere in my mouth.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well, I guess I don't know either. The more that I think about it, do I know?
I feel like cashmere, like if you stick a cashmere sweater in your mouth, it's just fuzzy and gross.
Well, I meant that it kind of tastes fuzzy in my mouth, which is good. Like it tastes like it's got an interesting texture. Fuzzy isn't probably the right word or choice, but you know. I don't know.
You are not selling this, Crossland.
Yeah, no, clearly I'm not. Maybe it's more like silk or velvet. Maybe that's more what I mean.
That's fair. There we go.
Yeah. To follow that up, I'm having a beer here called 8 Minute Song, made by Wilmington Brewing Company. Talk about them a lot. They make my favorite beers in the area, so I talk about them a lot for that reason. But it is a New England style IPA. It is fantastic. It is double dry hopped. It has notes of like tangerine and melon, and very, very not. I wouldn't call it mellow entirely, but it's not intense or in your face. It's delicious. This is one of my favorite beers that I've had in a while.
Nice.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just opened it and took a sip as you were talking, and I'm going to keep drinking it. I'm staring at my cocktail and I'm like, do I want that more than I want this right now? I don't know. Yeah. With that, we'd normally talk about predictions, but obviously we're starting a new book. And none of the predictions from the last book really came to pass. So we don't have any predictions to talk about.
Yep. Womp womp.
Womp womp. So with that, let's get into the chapters. So our breakdown begins with the pre-prologue, like the speech
prologue
from the
to
sovereign.
prologue.
The prologue to the prologue. And I think that this is an incredible opening to the novel. It's fascinating, as it's basically a monologue almost given in third person, from like obviously like witnessing Virginia's perspective, and only at the very end does it feel like maybe we're in Virginia's POV a little bit, as she in italics starts to talk about Darrow and him coming home and whatnot. So I think that it's brilliantly written, a speech from Mustang condemning the actions of the many factions of whom doubted in Darrow, and also sending him her love and support to the war on Mercury.
I think one of the coolest things about this is it's 2 months in the future compared to where we start the next prologue and the rest of the book. So that makes it a really kind of compelling thing to reference later on, as a little bit of time has passed in the battle ahead, just to see how it all lines up and what's going on. And I'm sure we'll learn. I'm sure that'll unfold on its own organically, but it'd be kind of cool to cheat a little bit and see what she's thinking, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to kind of get an idea or perception of where she's at in the timeline versus where he's at and what's actually, going on. This is a very, in a way, this sort of framing is very reminiscent of, God, maybe it's just front of mind because I rewatched it. That's probably why it is. But in the way that both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul will start an episode.
Jesus Christ. He doesn't stop talking about fucking Better Call Saul. Every goddamn day.
God, it's always something that I say with you, isn't it? It doesn't matter if it's... I switched from Stephen King...
Hack.
to Better Call Saul.
Garbage.
And Breaking Bad, which like
derivative.
Fuck. Oh my God. Anyway, like the idea of like jumping that far ahead in the story, and kind of giving an in medias res moment. Yeah, you're not gonna let me just walk away from that one. The sort of in medias res speech here is, I think, fantastic and very interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, it should be. And if it's not abundantly clear, I'm completely just giving you shit. Like, I love Better Call Saul. I love Breaking Bad. Haven't read much Stephen King, so I'm going to keep calling him a hack until I do. but I can't because you're holding them. You're holding them hostage for me.
This is
one book
true.
by Stephen King.
You haven't even read a book. You've read a short story.
It was a short story that nothing happened in.
It's just an old man and his dog. All right. So
until I know otherwise, that's what I know of Stephen King.
Fair enough. With that, we move into our prologue, which is Darrow, Blood Red. As stated, it takes place 2 months earlier. Fantastic idea, fantastic cut, and it's a great way to start off the story. Also, it's the namesake of my cocktail, of course, and it's repeated as this sort of way that these soldiers get in combat, which I find to be a very interesting kind of concept. Going blood red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious about all of the colors and like the choice of color. Is it just kind of chosen on a whim, like at the mood? And,
what do you mean?
Where they're asking like, what color is it going to be today? Like, I would think there'd be something a little bit more. Or is that later?
Those are all referential. So that actually is in this section, but the like Julii Jade is a color because they're green. The purple of the Minotaur because the Minotaur wears purple. They're all specific call outs to different armies.
Right. I got that. It was just why is he being offered those colors? And would he ever actually choose them? Or was it just more for the dramatic effect of him being able to say blood red?
I think it would partially be to distract from who's actually doing this operation a little bit, to maybe sow in some confusion. And then Darrow is, instead of sowing confusion, choosing to be direct and be this other force. I see where you're coming from, though. Like, why give him the options? And he's like, fuck that. This isn't about stealth anymore. Iron Gold is about stealth. This is about violence.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. That's my read on it.
Boy, howdy is it.
It's violent.
So we haven't seen any actual violence yet, have we?
In this section?
No. Yeah, in this section.
Yeah, we see violence.
What did we see so far?
The like fight scene where they're like jumping up and down between the layers and switching gravity, and Tongueless is the giant rifle not the rifle, but a Gatling cannon off of a fucking ship. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking like I focused a lot today. I've been focused a lot on the last couple chapters, which has not been. It's been preparing for violence, but he has a violent attitude about him.
Yeah, we start off with a bang here. I also like just the way that this book opens, right? This is the last laugh of the Ash Lord and the debut of his heir. And as we've stated, it is a violent debut. She has annihilated the White Fleet in the 3 weeks that we've been missing since Iron Gold, under the command of Orion, and left all the husks floating in this graveyard of ships above Mercury. Darrow's in the ship the Necromancer, and it is just a strong visual opening, and as well to a new phase of the war.
It's fucking brutal, but there's the idea of a floating ship graveyard. It never crossed my mind. It was super cool and super intimidating. You know?
Yeah, and to like turn it into the minefield that it is, and like cutting through, like blowing apart the ships to make their run at the ship that's passing so that they can steal, like all of it is just awesome. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We also get moments in here defining kind of the Howler lieutenants that we got to meet in the last book. But with like far fiercer detail. What do you make of Darrow's descriptions of both Alexander and Thraxa, and maybe even a little bit of Callaway? I feel like we got more Callaway in the last book, actually, than even I thought. But what do you think?
So I think the coolest thing for me is, one, it kind of sets the tone of the book, but two, it also shows their actual progression and their actual growth very quickly. The entire previous book, they seemed kind of like kids, and not Thraxa necessarily, but Alexander specifically seemed kind of like a student more than anything else. And here he is described as an actual terrifying fighter and leader and force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I mean, besides Severo, his best blade, right, later, is the way that he's described.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a huge deal. And then also, Thraxa is made to be an intimidating warrior. Like, it is. She is fucking gnarly. The wee lass and her whole thing with like talking to Pax. I think at one point, or it's referenced in memory, of course, talking to Pax and being like, I follow your dad because the people that I want to kill want to kill your dad, or something close to that.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's a really easy way to get him.
Yeah, what was it? I'm sure I don't know if you have it written down, but it was a really good quote.
I don't. There are just so many really good quotes right off the bat that I only did a couple.
Yeah, it was like I like killing bad people, and with your dad around, there's no shortage of them, or something like that.
Yeah, here it is. I like to kill people I don't like, and your daddy brings them like flies.
That's it. There we go.
Yeah,
there we go.
It's perfect because you can imagine her saying that to the little kid. It's woof. Yeah, it's pretty great. So we're going to talk about this man quite a bit throughout this section because he's referenced consistently, but Atlas Out Raw was only mentioned in whispers before this book, and he enters in here as the Fear Knight under Atalantia. Do you remember how it's said from the audiobook?
So I was listening to the audiobook. I think they call her Atalantia?
Atalantia sounds good.
Atalantia?
As long as Atalantia.
I think I go back and forth, honestly, or I just misremember it.
I know. That's my problem too.
I always say Atalantia in my head, though.
Yeah, that's also how I say it in my head when I'm reading it.
So if we are wrong in our pronunciation, I don't know, call us out for it, but we're probably not going to change. So,
well, you can let us know, and maybe I'll consider the fact that I'm wrong.
If you have a compelling reason why, I will follow it. But until then, I'm gonna call it how I feel like it should be said.
I absolutely. I mean, Jesus. He is described as, a known impaler, brutal commander of the Gorgon Legion, and just a terrifying prospect to fight that even Darrow is afraid of.
Yeah. But he was also afraid of Apollonius. He was afraid of a lot of people. That didn't pose a whole lot of a threat.
I think Apple still definitely poses a threat, but fair point.
Yeah, he does.
But that's
way to shoot my point in the dick. But in general, he seems like kind of a big problem at the moment, and they're gonna have to deal with him somehow.
Yeah, I think they are. I think it's interesting, unfortunate, perhaps. Darrow is violent right off the bat, and by violence, I'm not necessarily referring to his what he does to people in this section, but he comes off as this hostile force, this sort of hot off the press, hot off the iron, forged steel right off the anvil, anger ever since the end of Iron Gold, since that very angry ending to Iron Gold. And there's no shock of that, of course, especially seeing what had happened to his fleet and all of those different components. I mean, it is a wonder that he isn't angrier, I don't know. It's Slave 2, they call my friend. Those motherfuckers. And it's so... Oh, my God.
Yeah. This is the Darrow / the Reaper that I'm really excited to see. There's obviously a lot of sadness and lamenting from Darrow going forward. It bounces back and forth between violence and lament, but there's more rage, and there's more and more rage, and it's more fiery, and I'm so here for it. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
it's getting explosive.
Without a doubt.
Also, is this the most F-bombs that have been dropped this early in a book so far?
Without a doubt. There's so many F-bombs in the first 4 pages. There's a lot. in the spit tube, I think this is an interesting kind of point to jump into. Darrow's thoughts return, as they always do, to his family. He spends these moments reflecting. We've kind of come to realize over the course of the series, every time before battle, he goes into this contemplative meditation, this sort of quiet before the storm moment. And I actually wanted to read almost all of this one because I think it is some of the best writing from Darrow's perspective in the entire series so far. So, cursed to live, to kill. Is this who I will always be? Is this the life I crave? To rise before the sun, to smile at the cock and fart jokes of killers as they grow younger and I grow older, to sleep under tanks in the ruins of cities amongst the corpses. I no longer believe in the veil. I am the walking dead. Woe to those who cross my shadow. I miss the promise of life, the smell of rain, the murmur of waves on the shore, the sound of a full house. It is a life I have rented but never owned. I have stolen pieces of him and his mother, which I hold for ransom, promising one day to return. I know that is a lie. Mercury will be my end. To me, that is fucking brilliant and painful to see Darrow really put into words something we've been talking about for weeks now on the show. We talked about it with Hail Reaper even, but he's fully aware of the suffering he is causing his own family.
He is, and for me, I really don't know if that makes it better or worse. There is obviously this overwhelming sense of duty that seems to come before his family from the outside looking in, but simultaneously, it's that duty that is hopefully going to save his family and everyone else from a pretty dark fate. So he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place as far as his decision making goes. I'm sympathizing with him at this moment, I know. But I don't necessarily think he is strictly ignoring his duties as a father by going forward with this war. I think it's unfortunate that they're in conflict with one another, but I think this duty is ultimately going to serve his family.
I think you're right, and I think that gets to a point that we were talking about with Hail Reaper, is that ultimately this does serve his family. Like, he is doing work to save his family in the long run, not preserve it in the short term.
Right. He's almost sacrificing his own place within that family in order to save it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. He's a traveling salesman of a father, you know? Just selling ice cream machines.
And blood.
So the moment where Darrow launches out of his tube is just fantastic. It just highlights, I think, how good of a writer that Pierce has become over the course of the series. You know, the first time we ever sit in a spit tube from Darrow's perspective is all the way back in Golden Sun, and it's a fantastic moment. It's an incredible build of a moment, but here he executes the whole scene from the moment that he launches out in just such a fantastic, short, punchy way that creates this visual drama that I need to see. I need to see this scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exhilarating just reading it. It's so electric. It's just so well done. So well done. All of these moments that he writes, as far as like the spit tube launchings, but this one specifically is really fucking well done.
Without a doubt. And kind of the rage as he's sitting there in the tube flying through the air, he's thinking even more. Atalantia thought she could steal my Imperator, that her Fear Knight could keep my friend as a toy for torture, that I would simply run back to Luna and let my men die, that she could steal my son and there would be no consequences. Well, here I am, you deviant bitch. Here I bloody am, the motherfucking consequence. Dude. The motherfucking consequence always sticks in my head. And this is just, again, for a fucking prologue, this is just genius. It's stupid. I love it.
I'm going to venture out and guess that line is pretty frequently used amongst the community.
I think that it's quoted enough, and it's a respected quote, of course, but I don't think that it's used widely just because of the context. You know, like I think it's an accurate quote. It's a real portrayal, but to just like type out the motherfucking consequence, it's like I don't know.
But it's here I bloody am the motherfucking consequence.
Yeah.
I feel like it should be used more often. If it's not.
I love it. I absolutely adore it. Yeah.
Me too.
The combat for the rest of this section is just absolutely manic. Flipping between the ceilings, Tongueless firing a giant ship cannon, holding it, and like just melting people, cutting the various Gorgons in half, and the whole fight in the hall between the Olympics of the society and Ajax, and oh my gosh, the death of Tongueless. It's just, what in the hell, man? How did he pack all of this in? So just what a fucking opener.
Poor Tongueless. Who's gonna watch the Warden's dog now? That dude's just alone. He's been stolen and then abandoned.
That's so sad.
And have some severe separation anxiety. He's gonna be a bastard to live with.
You're saying this because of Cosmo.
Yeah.
That's fair. I understand.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly that.
And I can't let this remark go unknown, because everyone else in the podcast knew that it was a lie. But when you asked the question about Tongueless among Hail Reaper, everyone had to sit there and bite their tongues that they have, and
they do have tongues.
Try to answer that question within reason. And I think we all did a really good job without trying to like paint the future of the character and be really obvious about it. We were all trying to talk about his place in Iron Gold.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep, he died in the prologue. He wasn't prolific enough in the book to be remembered by half the crew on the last podcast throughout the story of Iron Gold, and then he died in the prologue of the next book.
Yep. It was pretty funny.
Yep.
Oh man. It was so
I read that and I'm like, fuck. All right. Well, there we go.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I was like, I know that this is coming really soon. It's like, you still got to take it seriously. So everyone else in that podcast had to do what I do and lie to your face.
They did a great job of it.
Yeah, I think we all pulled it off. So,
but also, like, I go into that sort of scenario knowing that there are things about characters that I am not privileged to. Mm-hmm. So I understand when people, I can see when people are kind of beating around the bush. You specifically, most of the time you do a pretty good job, but sometimes you're just like, I'm just not going to answer that. And you know why, but fuck you. I'm not telling you anything. So.
Mm-hmm. Right. You can sit and speculate on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, we move into the actual book itself, Part 1, Mischief. And before we actually move past the prologue, I just want to say one thing. I didn't know that there was a map in the very front of this book initially. The map is very helpful for understanding where all the various cities are on Mercury. I highly recommend checking it out, looking at it. If you don't have a book, I recommend searching for the Mercury map. There's one officially drawn up. Really easy to keep track of where all these cities are that they're moving between. Ooh. And kind of get a picture of everything.
So, I have gotten very used to skipping the everything that's not text because of, was it the second book? Golden Sun? I think it was, was it Morningstar, where Victra was alive? Victra was one of the characters.
It was Morningstar, right?
It was Morningstar. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I haven't been, but this is a cool map.
Yeah, just don't read the Dramatis Personae.
The what?
Dramatis Persona. It's like the glossary of characters.
Yeah, the thing that spoiled me last time.
Correct. This is the book that has incorrect information in it.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is even, we can talk about it at the end. But
did you do that on purpose, or is it
no?
funny?
It was a plot point that got cut.
Ah.
Which, so it's like some kind of weird old canon that only exists in the character glossary of first editions.
Do I have a first edition?
You should. I don't. We shouldn't talk about it though because it's not a good. You shouldn't read it. We'll talk about it later.
Right. Well, we'll talk about it later.
I will for sure remember.
The book.
Yeah, 14 episodes.
We'll see you guys in
3 months. Yeah, right. Okay, so the poem, though, that opens up this part 1, Mischief, it is Metamorphoses by Ovid. Metamorphoses is a well-noted piece of literature documenting kind of a myth of creation all the way through the kind of deification of Julius Caesar. Makes it kind of Greco, of course, in sort of origin point Greco-Roman. I think that the last part is really, really important, and I think that it's a fantastic choice by Pierce because I think that it allows for us to really understand what we've been seeing and watching as we've gone through the story to this point, the sort of transformation and mythologicalization of our hero, our protagonist, Darrow, and how in many ways, and how in many ways, and they could and maybe should be viewed analogously, Darrow and Julius Caesar, and how they've kind of been portrayed in these ways of kind of attaining power and whatnot. But I think it also points maybe to Lysander as well. What do you think?
So I think it very clearly mostly is pointed towards Darrow, but a lot of it does apply to Lysander. And if that's kind of a trolley line to follow, it has a lot of implications about what we're going to see for him, about references to ages past and the loss of faith and trust, just to see if that falls in line with him too. So it's either strictly about Darrow or it's kind of a cool foreshadowing for Lysander.
Interesting. I like that. It's a good read. All right. With that, we actually move into the book finally. Chapter 1, Darrow, Till the Veil. So right off the bat, Darrow again paints this horrifying picture of Atlas Au-Ra, one that doesn't kill his forces but maims them, his enemies, but maims them to spread fear. What do you picture meeting him will be like?
Ooh. I mean, it's going to be violent. That's all I can really guess at the moment, but really that's what I guessed when this question was posed about Apollonius. So I don't know what to think because his interaction was completely civil, except for him squeezing the eyeballs out of the warden, but mostly civil. Like anyone would do that, right? Like heat of the moment. Like I can't blame him.
Yeah, I mean, I'd casually squeeze out some eyeballs on a Tuesday. Like it's fine.
It's what you do. Like, oh, I'm so mad I could squeeze out his eyeballs. And then you do, and then you're like, all right, let's go get kimchi or something.
That's
I don't know why kimchi.
Kimchi's it's oddly specific.
It's delicious. Kimchi's delicious.
Right.
I want kimchi now.
Kimchi or sauerkraut?
Kimchi every time.
Okay. Just curious. All right. Yeah,
there's more spice to it. There's more flavor, and it covers up the just sour part. I don't know.
Interesting.
Or it blends with the sour. It balances. It's much more balanced than sauerkraut. Let's discuss the positives and negatives of sauerkraut and kimchi. I am very intentionally waiting until you start talking.
This is not the random show. Darrow, I really like the sort of myth that's built around Atlas in this section, right? We never directly see the man. We only hear about him and his violence. We do see some of his legions. We do see Ajax. We see a number of different agents of the man, but we don't see he himself. So, I mean, all told, he's a dude, man.
He's a dude, man.
He's a dude. Yeah. I mean, and this is maybe even a later revelation too, but when we find out that like Bellerophon is his child, of course, it makes that all that much more intense. And sort of the mixing of the Raw and the Grimace bloodline to make Ajax this sort of monster. I mean, dude is, I mean, probably not a good dad.
Maybe based on better his kids. Than Darrow.
That's, I mean, okay, fair point. But then we get the conversation after all of this sort of talk of violence and all these different things. We kind of go back low to the ground and we have a conversation with Dago. And it's a conversation with a character from the very beginning of this journey before Darrow, our legend, was born. What do you make of their talk, their conversation?
I think it really humanizes Darrow in the moment and gives him a brief relief from what's happening around him. Just kind of gets him to remember where all this was born from. It grounds him, seemingly, at least momentarily. It grounds him in the purpose of this war, or the reason for this war. So it was a really cool sort of conversation to jump into.
Yeah, I think that it's really fantastic, especially the components around Lycos and the dirt that he gives Darrow and kind of the memories and the idea that, you know, at the end of this, we're going to go get a drink. He still does his old thing that he used to bully Darrow for, you know, blowing smoke in his face, kind of for good old times. And, you know, if anyone else did that, Darrow would probably decapitate them. But because Dago, it's for some reason okay. It's really it's a really fascinating inflection point in the story to include this character that was from the very beginning.
Yeah, there is he smokes his cigarettes with his pinky and ring finger.
Mm-hmm.
How the fuck do you do that? That seems so uncomfortable.
Pinky and ring finger. That's not that bad.
Like where's your fingers go? Your other three fingers, like, are they poking into your face? Are they covering your eye? Like, what position is your hand in? Upright or like to the side?
Yeah, it mostly seems dumb.
It mostly seems really fucking dumb.
Yeah. Unless he does it backwards for some reason, but even that seems worse. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Good point. Dago's blind, so there's that.
That's a good point. That actually works out then. He can just kind of rest his other fingers on his nose.
Yeah, that is probably actually what it is. Keep the heat away. Interesting. After Darrow walks away from Dago, though, he begins to kind of generalize about the war that is around them. I'd point you to the map, like I said, if you haven't checked or seen, if you guys haven't looked at it. But as Darrow describes the instruments of war, the cannons Gilrastes has mounted around Heliopolis, the waste of the Ladon, the impaling stakes, the war machines, the dreaded keening of a Spider-Man's activation, all of them kind of accumulate in this exemplification of the real war we find ourselves immersed in now. What do you think of this change in pace of like moving to the front of the battle as opposed to being above it or kind of locked in space?
I think it'll make for some really, really compelling action scenes, which I know, and you know, we've talked about a lot on this show, that Pierce is just fucking masterful at those sort of scenes. For the first, no, not the first, for one of many times I'm going to say this, I am super fucking pumped for this story, for this book.
Yeah.
Just based on this entire first section, everything about it, I am so excited.
It's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I can't help but agree with you. I think that it would make for some very compelling action scenes. I think it would also make for it's a very great way to kind of set the world and universe, and you can definitely see a TV show episode kind of starting with these different cuts of the cannons being lifted up. And I think that this is actually something that Star Wars in general does really well, is when characters walk and talk through different set pieces as the rebel forces or the Empire are setting up their weapons and kind of the humdrum of the people around them. This feels very similar in sort of description.
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of imagine everyone doing their part, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we move from that to Orion, and Orion is broken, to put it lightly, I think, after her encounter.
Very lightly.
Yeah.
He said it looks like she's been eaten. Like her face has been eaten.
It's yeah. I did boo. Ugh. Yeah. It hurts for her. To put it lightly, after her encounter with Atlas and even her existence as a commander in the fleet, she feels kind of like this broken entity. What do you make of her sort of jaded, angry exterior after that experience? And do you think that she's right accusing Darrow of wasting neurons on regret and his choices?
I think it makes total sense for her character and for, what would you call it, her color? Just as a blue regarding
blue.
Logic over everything. Do they even have the capability of thinking outside of logical terms? I guess they do, but they don't cross over that very often. But it's sensical to not waste time wondering what could have been if other choices had been made. Putting that focus to use on how to get out of whatever situation you've been put yourself into makes more sense. And beyond that, this is kind of how she's coping what she's been going through. So far be it from me to be the one that tells her she's wrong in that jaded attitude, you know?
Yeah. It's... You're right. And I think especially when you consider what she's been through is when it really starts to color it in that way. And like you said, I mean, that's really what kind of gives it away. It also tells you how, to the extent of violent and brutal and torturous behavior Atlas Al Ra will go to just to kind of toy around with someone and ruin them. The Jackal was a vile character. Atlas is starting out on a pretty good foot to take him from that throne.
Yeah.
He's outward about it. I guess it's the difference is the Jackal was kind of secretive about his sort of things. And oh my gosh, Atlas is just set up to be this monster.
Yeah. Yeah, he is.
So, go ahead.
It's super fucking cool.
It's cool and terrifying.
Yeah.
So Orion's words really kind of jar Darrow, and he reflects on Virginia as he kind of like reflects on Virginia in the Senate. She fears too much to see her father and brother in the mirror to dissolve the Senate, but I fear it merely emboldens the covetous nature in the mortals of weaker substance. Do you think he holds regard or any respect for the Senate? Do you think he even holds regard or respect for her position as sovereign? Obviously as his wife, but...
I don't think he holds respect for anyone unless they've earned it explicitly.
Okay.
I think he respects the Senate itself, the entity, the Senate, but not the individual members. If that makes sense.
Okay. Sure.
I don't know. There's some complication to that one. But trying to boil down like what I think he generally believes, I think that's kind of where I'd put him.
Okay. All right. What do you think about his read on Virginia and her position as the sovereign?
There's a quote in here where he says, I don't trust my sovereign, I trust my wife.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that says everything we need to know. He respects her as a person. He doesn't respect the position that she's put in and the choices that she has to make in order to appease the rest of the Senate. The politics of compromise.
All right. I dig that as an explanation. I think that's a great read, especially pulling in kind of that other quote for sure. So with that, we move into chapter 2, Lysander, Annihilo, which is so interesting because you'd feel like it would be Annihilo, but I heard it said as Annihilo, and I was like, oh, yeah. All right. I'm wrong. Good call.
Idiot.
But, yeah, me dumb. Me big dumb sometime. Lysander's regard for Diomedes in the immediate situation, I think, feels like very high praise. And all told, the man, Diomedes himself, is very respectable. It's kind of interesting, again, that he doesn't revel over kind of the immolation of the Ash Lord. He's not clapping his hands, but instead comes to offer respect. What do you think this peculiar man from the Rim might do in the coming pages?
More than anything, I think Diomedes and Lysander as a pair will be a very formidable group. Couple,
gang,
I guess. Gang. We'll go with gang. They're a biker gang now. But as Lysander says, he kind of lacks some more of the complicated understandings of how the people of the core operate and what pitfalls to look for. So if Lysander can kind of bolster that, and Diomedes can shine where he shines, like they're going to basically cover. They're going to be better than an Iron Gold together than each of them are separately, I think. They're going to be a very, very strong pairing.
All right. I dig that view because I think that they do make a very I would go so far as to say kind of like an odd couple, but they also,
for sure,
because of that, I think that they complement each other in unexpected ways.
I agree.
So this feels very poignantly written. Lysander is looking at Seraphina and kind of discussing this, and I found it particularly funny on this read, so I wanted to read it out loud. But my attraction still persists. Credit 10 years separation from my own species, I suppose. Either that, or I've discovered a latent predisposition for wild things and shall be doomed for my life by my taste in precocious women. And all I have to say is, eep.
She's still a child, and still to catch a predator-ing him. But yes, this is a really, really intriguing passage. I'm really curious to see how this will grow or develop over time. Are we at this point? Are we just ignoring the fact that she's 16?
She's got to be like 16, 17.
Well, yeah.
I'm going with the original. I'm going with Morningstar definition.
So she's 16.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Maybe she turned 17.
Jailbait. Jailbait right there.
Jailbait. Oh, geez. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Come on, Lysander. Like, I think we talked about this previously, but like. Don't know what gold standards are. Don't know what any of that looks like. Don't know if Cassius even like told him any sort of foundational rules. But yeah, dude, like, what are you doing? It's like, I want to have iron golds with you, baby. It's just, she's like, dude, I'm 16 and I fucking hate you. Something like that, you know.
Cool. I'm going to go to algebra. See you later.
Oh my god. Speaking of, was it in the last section that they were talking about math on the hull? Or is that the later section? I think it is the last section. No, it's a later section when they're sitting up. I think.
They talk about math here, yeah.
Okay. I just have to flash back here for everyone else. So PJ and our friend Natalie will very frequently, when intoxicated, do what exactly is it called? What do you guys call it?
So it was our tradition for our New Year's parties, and we didn't get to do it last year because Natalie was pregnant, which now she's not. She has a very healthy baby, which is growing so much that I don't think I consider him a baby anymore. He's very cute and very nice boy. But every New Year's we would do what's called drink drink to forget math. So she was a math major for undergrad, I believe, right? Yeah.
Economics. But
I thought
math.
economics
I think
was
it was a minor in math.
I thought it was math major, economics master.
Regardless, very good at math.
Either way, lots of math. And I'm physics with a math minor. So we would do drinking to forget math, and we would put up a math problem on a whiteboard. And one that was difficult, but we could both do without a calculator, just at any point. Like, we could just do it. And then we would drink. And every couple hours, we would, like, check in with each other and see, like, can you still do this math problem? And that was kind of the entire point, was to keep drinking until we couldn't do math anymore. So,
fun fact, it looks like she actually has a bachelor's degree in both economics and mathematics.
Okay, so it was a double.
And then a master's in econ as well.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
I knew she was, I could have sworn she was a major in math, so that makes sense.
So that checks out. But yeah, so that scene with Orion reminded me of her, like, be tortured to forget math kind of thing, and she still remembers math, so anyway. Yeah.
She's behind in the episodes right now, so in a few months when you get here. Hi, Natalie.
True. I think she's still reading Golden Sun.
She is. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, Diomedes makes mention that his father used to say that anyone who is interesting could be described in 2 words. And so he asks Lysander for the impressions, what impression he could get of Atalantia from those 2 words, and he says velvet buzzsaw. And I think that that's a fantastic one, and the imagery he kind of pours forth is even better. We're kind of finally getting impressions of this final fury that we've been hearing out for an entire book now. What do you think of her? What do you think of those words as a descriptor?
Oh man, those words as a descriptor are fucking brutal. Like, it's such a visceral description of something so elegant and refined, I guess, are not the best way to describe velvet now. Like, velvet is kind of dated, and it's often dirty and just kind of gross. But velvet in its heyday, and new velvet, is luxurious and elegant. And pairing that with a buzzsaw, like, I want to meet this person, and I want to never ever step foot in a room with this person at the same time. You know,
interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting read. I'm glad we got to get that out of you for sure. It's yeah. Okay, all right. We also get kind of an interesting dump of information right at the end of this chapter, that of what Atalantia sees in Lysander as his kind of use, both the mind's eye and her desire to kind of discover how it works, as well as his relationship with Gilrastes, the master maker of Heliopolis, that Darrow already spoke about, and we learn even more about a little bit later here.
Yeah. Information dump. This sort of style of information dump hasn't happened in a while, but it's something that Pierce Brown really does well. He does it very, very well. These dense little nuggets that he just tucks in to different chapters. I feel like he really didn't do that so much the last book, but he did it a lot, at least in the first couple books. Especially Golden Sun, I feel like this was like a common thing in Golden Sun. But that's just... I can't think of specifics, and it's just kind of going off of feeling that I have, like, while I was reading. But I love this whenever he does it.
No, I think you're kind of right. The only times that I can think that something similar was kind of employed is all of the different mentions of Deepgrave that happened earlier, where we didn't really know what Deepgrave was or why that existed or what its purpose served immediately, but we did have an understanding that it was kind of important in a quick bite.
Mm. Yeah.
So
that's
yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that it is more prevalent in the original trilogy for sure. So far, at the very least.
Mm-hmm. Even the Deep Grave stuff. Even that stuff, it's less dense. This is so much information packed into one paragraph, whereas the Deep Grave stuff was a lot more spread out, and there was an air of mystery around it, and we got information slowly over time until we finally figured out exactly what it was. Like we got references to it, but I feel like this is something completely different, where it's a whole lot of information and implications all at once. And then we'll sort through it later.
That's a really interesting point. I kind of want to bring this up since we're talking about this also in reflection of the older books. One of the things that I think is really interesting about the switches with POVs between the original trilogy and adding in the POVs in the second trilogy is that I wonder if all of the original trilogy was obviously written mostly linearly as far as the story goes, because you've got one POV that you're dragging through. I feel like I feel like Iron Gold feels as though it was also written linearly while hopping through perspectives. Not as though Ephraim's perspective was written all at once and then joined with Lyria's. Not like he wrote all of Ephraim's line and then he went to Lyria and then he went to Darrow and then he went to... who am I missing? Lysander. Not like all of those were written in complete isolation of each other, but as though he was working his way linearly through the story. This feels more like it was linearly writing his way through the characters almost. The reason I say that is only because Deep Grave is referenced by not almost every character, but it's referenced by both Darrow and Ephraim within kind of the same part. And so that makes me think that he wants to put it on our minds before we know exactly what it is, even providing multiple perspectives on what Deep Grave is through multiple eyes. But this doesn't have that same twist. Like, we're not talking about the mind's eye from Darrow's perspective, you know? That's my comparison.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Random, but that's a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So, Diomedes' final words of the chapter, I think here are fantastic. To meet Atalantia, conditionally. To see my uncle again, certainly. And he's talking about what he's afraid of here, and it's just again. we know that like Atalantia is a terrifying force, and we've actually seen the results of those choices and actions, because in reality she was pulling the strings for all of Iron Gold. But we don't know about Atlas.
Yeah, it sounds worse and worse every step of the way on this one, as far as like meeting Atlas goes.
Mm-hmm.
He does not sound like a cool dude in general.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no. Oh, uh-oh. So,
uh-oh.
Any other thoughts on this chapter?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
So, chapter 3, Darrow, Storm God. Kate, we're introduced right off the bat to Cadus Harnassus. What do you make of this interesting orange?
I am interested in him. He is so fucking cool right off the back. Right off the bat. Jesus. Not back. Right off the bat. He's... I don't know. I don't know what to think of him, but I want more. I really want more of him. I like the reference of old Tokyo. I know we've had a little bit of a touch on it, but not much. So I'm interested to see if we can learn more about it. Like I think we know about old Tokyo. I think it's just Tokyo to us, but to learn what made it old Tokyo as opposed to just fucking Tokyo, I don't know.
That's a fair point. I think it's been kind of described a little bit previously, and kind of the way that I think about it, and I think it kind of goes in conjunction with the way that I feel like it's... Someone definitely correct me if you remember looking at any number of people who send me messages about things that I get just slightly wrong. Please let me know if I get this wrong. But I think it's Ephraim who mentions Old Tokyo on Earth, or maybe it's even back in Morningstar. Darrow references that the Storm Knight was from Old Tokyo. Actually, that'd be Golden Sun. The Storm Knight at the time was from Old Tokyo. And it reminds me, it kind of just makes me think about like our modern day Tokyo, if it had survived the conquering, like the city itself. But now it's like a weird old remnant of humanity that's kind of long gone, but obviously people have re-inhabited over time. That's kind of what I think of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I personally like as well how Darrow's two imperators are called immovable objects and kind of square off against each other here as Orion and Harnassus kind of confront each other around the sort of plans. I think that it's a fascinating little tiff they get in.
Yeah. Yeah, he's they're pretty hot-headed, I think, both of them.
It's like Darrow keeps a bunch of hotheads around. You know, you got like Severo.
Who the fuck is this guy, Darrow? Like, why is he attracting such ridiculous people?
He's also kind of a hothead himself, you know?
What? No.
No way. This Helldiver? Nuh-uh. Couldn't be. Not my Darrow. We also get our second orange of the chapter here, Gilrostes, a cruel and severe orange who seems to have a bit of a drug habit. He's a bit, just a bit. He's a creative architect and one that reminds me of kind of like a populist version of Howard Rourke from The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. All that to say, like, he's basically very kind of idealized and self-obsessed, and you know, the thing that I would say is that he does care a lot about people, and that's the biggest division between Howard Rourke and Gilrostes as characters. But otherwise, I feel like they have very similar kind of attitudes right off the bat. What do you see? What do you think?
Well, if that's the case, then the Ayn Rand references are all over the place in this book, with Atlas being one of the main villains.
Interesting.
You know?
I'm trying to actually think if there's any like good. I also don't want to anti-spoiler this. I don't want to say that's not.
Don't say
thing.
anything. Just think about it later.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing, but I'm gonna think about it more now. But yeah, fair point. I know Pierce doesn't really like Ayn Rand, but that doesn't mean you don't read something and like pull bits you like out of it, even if it's bad, arguably.
I mean, you can still use someone you don't like as the fucking villain, you know?
Yeah, true. I mean, like, the Jackal exists, right? Well, he doesn't. He's dead now, but...
Well, yeah. I am firmly in belief that Pierce Brown loves the character of the Jackal on a personal level, and that is who he strives to be as a person.
It's a fair point. Him and Apollonius.
Yep. He just took two different parts of his own personality and like split them, made two wonderful, lovely characters out of them.
Fair enough. With that, we get our first description of the storm gods, which are these huge, ancient mechanical creations designed to shape the weather for the planet in combination with the Lovelock engines and mass drivers, kind of terraforming the whole thing and making it habitable for people. I think that it's just a short little section, but it's fascinating stuff. What do you make of the storm gods, the engines, and what do you think Darrow is planning with them?
Ooh, I'm really not sure yet, but I am pretty positive it's going to be some sort of jerry-rigged, not weapon, but tool of war, like the Rising did with the claw drills to help him escape from the Jackal's custody. Mm-hmm. Like it's going to be sort of a unique use case. And I actually have this as one of my predictions, I think. Right? I put it down as a prediction. Okay. So I'll kind of spoil spoil what I'm thinking, but I think those engines are going to be used to induce a tidal wave. And the Operation Tartar Sauce people are going to be in fixed up star shells or something that allow them to breathe and operate and walk freely underwater. So they're basically going to just crash a tidal wave on top of an army and then beat the shit out of them while the water's all still there.
Wow. That's a fascinating prediction, PJ.
Well, they put the engines in the water. What are you going to do from the water? I don't know. Make a tidal wave.
It's a fair point.
Mm.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, well, it's going to be addressed, so I can't, good stuff. I actually really like that idea. I think that's fascinating. It's very cinematic. Like, it's a great idea.
Like, Darrow's going to be body surfing. Like, it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah. Yep. Body surfing Darrow. Can't imagine anything different. He's got a little boogie board. It's got his pulse armor on it. Mm-hmm. It's good stuff. With that, chapter 4. Move into chapter 4, which is Lysander once again, and it's Ajax, son of Aja. And a terrifying concept. Aja has a son, and we saw him in action earlier. He's not as good as Lorne is, but he is as fast as Lorne is. 350 pounds of muscle, and just, Jesus fuck, what the fuck is this dude? Yeah, just huge.
Do you
man.
Think
anyway,
the
that's
Golds
just
have an American Football League?
I doubt it.
And if they did, what would the size of their linebackers be?
Like 500 pounds.
That's on the low side, man. It's got to be on the low side. Like, I bet they get their like one-off 750, like 3/4 tons.
Jesus. When you put it that way, I'm a little upset. But what do you make of Lysander's political musings throughout this section, discussing all the conflicting ideals of the Rim and pondering what might happen to him at the end of all of this at the hands of Atalantia?
I just kind of hope this line of writing kind of gets kept up. I enjoy his sections in this first chunk so much. I love the depth of the politics that go on and just the amount of lore that comes through naturally through his talking. It's super, super cool. So I just want more of it, is really my thoughts on the political musings. Is give me more.
More, please. More,
please.
That's fair. That's fair. In both of the chapters, Lysander is pretty horny, to put it lightly. The way that he talks,
be stepping off that Serafina shit. Chris Hansen's going to come around that corner any second. He really is.
Oh my god, I can't help but imagine like Chris Hansen and a camera crew coming around a corner in the middle of the Emilio now, and just interrupting
just
some
like
grand
in Lysander's chest.
Yeah, the whole time.
Back up and look up in order to see him.
Yeah.
Oh shit!
It's oh no, yeah, fuck. Oh my god, but. The way that he talks about Kalendora in this kind of glowing regard as this sort of like familial kind of auntish figure, like that's kind of the way that he thinks and talks
that makes
about
it worse.
It does make it worse. I'm not saying it makes it better, Dan. Man, definitely not saying it makes it better. As a man, I think of her. As a man, I think of her differently, and all I have to say is like, bro, you are a total horn dog. Like, yeah. But all told, though, his description of scenes and the world is really interesting and a different way to present our enemy, Atalantia. What do you make of his return to his family of old between Kalendora, Ajax, and kind of Lysander's overall horniness?
Well, I mean, his overall horniness needs to be addressed, and he needs to find an outlet that's not with an underage girl. So, I mean, if it's an aunt, sure, like that is better.
Kalendora is not actually his aunt, but
okay. But with Ajax, there was a pretty interesting dynamic through the whole thing.
I can't stop laughing. Okay, all right. Continue with the Ajax thought. I'm sorry.
Ajax through the whole introduction is super like untrusting and calloused, but immediately when Lysander answers all the questions and goes through the trials and everything, and Ajax is satisfied with that, he becomes this super warm, jovial, almost Santa Claus-like man. It was almost like that entire like questioning period of Lysander being there was completely ignored and forgotten, and it was as if his old friend walked into his house unannounced randomly. He's like, "Hey, my dear friend Lysander." Like it was like he completely sectioned off that part and ignored that it had happened, and then greeted him as if this was the instant that he had first seen him in a decade. It was really kind of cool in that respect.
I agree with you. I think that is actually really interesting. I think it makes Ajax even more of a sociopath. But yes.
Oh yeah. But
that also makes it very interesting. Right. No doubt. Also, like, just adding into that, Ajax and Diomedes being cousins is one of such like distant relation in a way. Like, they are cousins, sure, but I love the way that Lysander thinks about it. Their familial ties are nothing but the blood of conquerors, really, and they themselves could not be further apart in every other way.
Yeah, I can see that. As far as family goes in this book series. I don't know why I said show. I have no idea. I don't think of it as a show. Anyway, as far as family goes, it's not as close as it seems to us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they make note of the familial ties because that's important to them, but the actual family isn't. So it's more just a function of the amount of time they pour into studying families and studying the important gold families that makes them aware of who's technically related to one another, but they don't seem to be family, quote unquote, in the traditional terms.
Sure.
So
yeah,
I think is it in this section, or is it later? I'm not sure. Where they mention that Ajax was kind of born out of a loveless relationship between Aja and one of the Raws.
I think it is this section.
It is this section. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's kind of cool to see the joining of houses to create just monster gladiators. Obviously there's a lot more to it than that, with like the politics and the power structures of the society and all of that coming into play, but adding in just the genetic monsters that come out is fucking cool.
Well, and we do know that he's the son of Atlas. So it's Atlas and Aja's kid.
It is Atlas. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Atlas.
Which just adds to the absolute terrifying nature of this child.
Yeah, he's a fucking crazy person. Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
that's as much as I can really say at the moment. He's just a fucking crazy person.
Without a doubt, I could not agree more. And just to like lean into that, even I keep doing this for kind of the points, but like the way that the insults are flowing back and forth between Diomedes and Ajax is just wonderful. Diomedes almost kind of like swats his cousin away like a crude fly, and then fucking Diomedes bends to Ajax's will and takes it off because they're both the Storm Knight. He's pissing on his cloak right there, and it becomes clear again how far away from the rim we've gone. Just to arrive back at the core golds and their mischief and chicanery once again.
Family. Have they met before?
I don't think so. I think that's kind of the context of like him saying cousin. Like you're that cousin.
Okay. This is some aggressive joking around if they haven't met before.
Yeah. Ajax and Lysander are of a similar age. I want to say Ajax is like 23 and Lysander's like 21.
Maybe 20.
Something like that. I think with the passage of time, the little bit of passage of time,
much time passed. In Iron Gold, I think it was like a couple months.
He's between 20 and 21 regardless. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, they're close in age. Old enough where he's kind of like an older brother.
That's fair.
Yeah. But yeah. What'd you make of kind of the insults and the way that kind of escalates?
I thought it was hilarious. Like, and if they had known each other better and this was like just getting back to hanging out with my cousins, I think it'd be really fucking funny. But these are not jokes to be made with people you've never met before. So I think it's a lot more hostile than it comes across as. So I'm curious to see what sort of repercussions are going to happen.
I can't help but agree. Mm-hmm. It's a whole lot. I mean, between the two of them, as far as that goes. So the protocol of the dancing mask, I think, is one that is fascinating. It was first mentioned in this first chapter with Lysander earlier on in the book, but it really we kind of understand that it wasn't just like it was capitalized in the initial Lysander chapter, and it's kind of like, why is that capitalized? I don't know what you're talking about, Octavia, in a flashback. And now we kind of get an understanding of like, oh, the dancing mask is like a social or political codification of tactics, and it reminds me of what most people would consider like Machiavellian. You know, like it feels of a similar vein. We don't get enough description of it yet, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, all the small ceremonial things within gold culture is super, super interesting to me. But it at the same time, it increases the depth that this whole book series has. So Pierce Brown does a wonderful job of just deepening the lore in kind of throwaway, semi-insignificant ways. But it's what makes things real, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It builds out the world. It's great world building in just small doses, and it's like, oh well, Lysander knows this, and Darrow would never talk about this because he doesn't know courtly behavior at all. You know, if we had a Mustang or Virginia perspective back in the original trilogy, maybe we would have heard of this and we'd have understanding, but we would never learn this from Darrow.
Right. Exactly.
Cool. Anything else on Lysander for the week?
No, but I guess just kind of leave it off. I am so much more engaged with these chapters. Or this chapter? Is it just one with Lysander?
No, I think it's two.
Might be two. Yeah, I think it's two. But these chapters with Lysander are so much more engaging to me than the entire previous book. So
That's
I'm
wild.
super excited. I don't know if it's like actually written differently or if it's just me being in a really strange mood this week and like super jacked for this book. But for whatever reason, they're really, this whole book is latching on harder than the previous book did.
Hey, and you know what? That's fair. I think we kind of discussed the meta conversation that surrounds Iron and Gold a little bit, which is that the switching of POVs kind of feels like a harsh one. And so now we've done all the setup work. We've had our Red Rising. Now we get to have kind of, and I'm not setting this as an expectation for you, but in the same way that Red Rising has Golden Sun to follow it up, we now have done all the setup work, and now we get to kind of do the payoff to some degree.
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense. So because you've had all this time with his character, all of a sudden now you care about him, and now we can proceed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
With that, Chapter 5, Darrow. Final chapter of the week to discuss, Voyager Cloak. Right off the bat, Darrow sets the stage for the coming conflict by stating, "This is our Thermopylae," and stating that there will be no escape. They kind of define the line, and it's the only chance that they have at victory is to define the engagement, not waiting it out, not attacking, not staying on defense, but to pick where their battle is going to happen and how it is going to happen.
All right. So, how many times do I have to say this? I fucking love this book already, man. Like this whole chapter, just it's energetic, man. I'm excited. I'm so excited. This is just amping me up more. Like I don't have anything of substance to like add to that. And I know it doesn't mean anything to say this is getting me excited, but it is, and I'm Please,
yep.
Can we do this like every day instead of every week?
Nope. Welcome to torture, buddy. That is really funny though. I feel you. It's worth noting. Of course, we talked about this with Hail Reaper. We've talked about it with Howler Pod. We talked about it with every guest, and everyone's been like, "I can't believe you're so patient to go through these." And I was like, "I don't think PJ is going to be very patient with me in Dark Age. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to hold it together for the weeks ish between reading." And yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
I hate you.
It's certainly something, and I just want to point out something for those who might not know. Thermopylae, very famous battle. Spartans standing against the Persians, lost. It's the basis of the 300. It ended up being, it was a lot more than 300 actual people were there, but just so you know, that's kind of the battle. If you don't know what that is, go ahead, look it up. It's great. It's a great little bit of history for those who don't know. So, with that, Darrow explains the elaborate bait and switch he's pulling on the Ash Legions to draw them in so they can win a victory. But the people in the room here are actually a part of another strategy, Operation Tartarus.
Tartar sauce. I just want to know what the fuck it is. Like they're stringing this in front of us. Like I just want to know. I just want to know what the fucking plan is. Yeah. Until I know otherwise, it is the tidal wave.
Fair enough. It's a fair point, and we're definitely being strung along by Darrow in these moments as he like cuts away between different bits that we get to highlight. He like walks out of the room and whatnot. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So Harnassus gets really angry at Darrow after a quick exchange and says, "You know why I prefer Severo to you? He may burn hot, but you go cold. There's no talking to you when you're like this. You're inhuman. You're a god emperor." What do you make of our dear warlord Darrow and his intentions to use the storm gods? How about his use of the Howlers to force Harnassus into submission? Fuck, what?
That's a fucking turn. That is a fucking turn for Darrow. I really didn't see that coming, but it kind of solidifies the change in character that we've seen Darrow kind of going through. The harder exterior, the more brutal. He's becoming more and more brutal, and more of a straight up warlord, verging on dictator, which is scary but compelling, I guess.
I mean, I think the reality is that Harnassus isn't entirely wrong, right? Like,
no, he's completely right.
Right. I think he's stretching it a little bit with the "you are a god emperor." Like he's definitely like, you're acting like a tyrant. You know?
Yeah, I think that's effectively the same thing. I see that as the same. That meaning the same thing.
God Emperor gives me weird 40K vibes, so I don't like that personally. But yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Functionally, it's the same.
I saw it as hyperbole.
Yeah, definitely. I totally understand. Yeah, it's just this sort of military commander. He's like, you, technically speaking, we shouldn't be listening to you at all. You're a criminal. You're a bloody tyrant. Like, there's, yeah, man. I mean, dude is described as hot-headed, and in all honesty, also the description of Harnassus gives me big dwarf vibes in the way that he's kind of short. He's got this like mushroom like face, or face that, you know, it's kind of, yeah. He's got a weird kind of stoutish description.
Bulbous drinking nose, I think was
yes.
the description. What the fuck does that mean?
I dwarf to me.
What is a drinking nose?
So it's a known thing that if you drink a ton, your nose actually gets fatter, like the end of your nose, and redder.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact reason why, it's one of those things where it's like, is that an old wives' tale? But I think it's real.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's interesting enough that it's used to describe the character here. So the moment of planning, of course, with Harnassus and with Operation Tartarus is interrupted, and Darrow kind of bursts forth into this action mode, planning for the coming conflict. He sends Harnassus to Tyche to defend interests and resupply troops. Orion is sent to the ocean with the storm gods, with the final one to be delivered out there. And Orion and Darrow share this exchange where he goes from Vanguard to Veil Sister. And this moment of war is kind of pinned by a quiet moment of contemplation between the two of them. And it's lovely.
It is. It's touching. It really kind of shows the connection that the two of them have built together. And I think I don't think it's in this section specifically, but I think it's before he rescues her, where he talks about how, and remembers about, like, how they met, and when he took the Pax and made her captain of the ship. Like, they've been very, very close and confidence of one another since then. So just kind of seeing their quiet, private interactions is heartwarming. Heartwarming for the little warlord that we're seeing. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I only laugh because you said little warlord, and I think that I would even go so far as to say little warlords.
Yeah.
Both of them. But yeah, it is a heartwarming moment because it was one of two people who were enslaved by the society and getting to share kind of this liberation. Originally, the liberation, Orion didn't necessarily understand that he was a red, not a gold, but it's obviously become a component of their relationship to some degree, to kind of an understanding.
Entirely, yeah.
Yeah. So after they all take off and everything like that, Darrow reveals to Rona a kill switch upon her inquisition. She finds out about it because she can read Darrow like a book as, his niece. And it's one that can be pulled if you were to die in the battlefield to cut off the storm gods if it's absolutely necessary before he has to run off in his squadron to join Alexander near the wastes of the Ladon. What do you make of the kill switch, and what do you think's next?
I think the kill switch itself is kind of important, and something that Darrow completely overlooked. So on a kind of whim, when it was mentioned, Rona gets the information, but this is something that he would usually probably share with Severo. You know, like he wouldn't normally just have this information alone. It'd be shared between the two of them, and probably nobody else. But at least there's somebody that if something bad goes down with one of them, the other knows all of the secret things that are important.
Right. I would even go so far as to say, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this as a question, but sort of the lament of Severo being gone is felt really, it's a really strong moment throughout this entire section. You can't help but feel,
so, you know?
Darrow doesn't say it out loud, but he does say it to himself a lot. He is reflecting on, you know, sort of the only people who can be as violent as Atlas are Severo and I. And he's also like, I miss Severo. This would be what Severo is doing. And I think this is, you're pointing out an excellent example that Darrow doesn't point out, is that Rona being here to reveal this is information that definitely would have been shared with Severo. This backup plan would have been in Severo's hands.
Right. Completely.
So, yeah. Fantastic read. Oh, man. Well, that's it. That's it for the week. Any other comments? Any other thoughts on this section?
No, I guess not. But now I get to read the next section, which makes me happy.
That's, I mean, fair. Good point. It's a good time. With that, we move into PJ's predictions. So you've got a couple to talk about. We are still sourcing crowd predictions for PJ or questions that you want to ask PJ. Either in our final episode, if you want to wait until he's completely done, or for additional episodes in the future, if you want to ask him kind of a semi-leading question or predicting question, send them to me. You can send them to me via Discord. You can send them to me via the email. I just ask that you avoid spoilers in any case, just in case PJ sees them.
If there are spoilers for within your question, that Cross can kind of decipher or whatever, or any sort of communication that you put forward with us that has a spoiler, please just put spoiler in caps at the front of your message. And then I will read that and won't read farther, and Cross will read it.
We're fairly disciplined at this point. So
we are pretty disciplined. Most of the time it's Crossland interacting with stuff like that anyway. But just in case, that's good practice. So that's helpful, but
without a doubt.
Yeah.
So with that, let's get into your predictions for this week.
Yes. So, do Ajax and Diomedes actually fight potentially in the bleeding place? And I really desperately want to say yes. I so badly want that to happen. But I think no. I think they'll get pretty intensely. It's gonna come across as like ribbing each other, as close cousins might do, but it's gonna be a little bit more hostile than that, especially because they're not actually close. But I don't think it'll actually boil over. I don't know.
All right.
Next one. What is Operation Tartar Sauce? Which I mentioned before. And the engines will be used to create a tidal wave in which the forces will ride into battle. They will body surf into battle in like rigged out star shells made for underwater battling. Which, I don't know. We want a beach episode. That's what I want. And the final one that I put, because I couldn't think of anything else, can we trust anyone? And the answer is no. Shit's going sideways as it always does. Shit begets shit begets shit.
That's great. Love that.
So that's what I've got.
All right. Fun. So with that, next week we are going to be reading through chapter 11. So that'll be until page 92 in the hardcover, 6 through 11. So about 51 pages of joy for you, PJ.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'll probably read it like tonight or tomorrow. Yeah.
I'm in the zone this week, so I think I'm probably going to do notes tomorrow. That's my plan since I have the day off.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, it's the game plan. So that's where we'll leave you for this week.
Thank you, of course, to our producers, Tim and Andrew, for helping us keep the show's lights on. Also, check out our links in the show notes. You can find our schedule, Patreon, previous episodes, our websites, all of our socials in one convenient place.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, big shout out to Tim for getting that all together. We talked about it in the last episode, but the links is awesome. So with that, make sure if you aren't subscribed, definitely subscribe. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. And thank you so much for the support. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.